Dustfield Station, New Mexico Territory, summer 1891. The western sun beat down hard, turning the dirt roads into shimmering waves of heat. Dust hung thick in the air, coating everything in a reddish haze. Dustfield Station wasn't much of a town, just weathered buildings, creaking boardwalks, and the constant smell of dry earth and hard work. When the train finally screeched to a halt, only a handful of passengers got off. Mostly men, rail workers, traders, a couple of prospectors. Then, from the last car, stepped Rebecca May Hollis. Her once bright blue dress was dulled by days of travel, the hem frayed, her gloves smudged. But she held her head high, one hand on her worn valise, the other resting over the letter tucked close to her heart. Heads turned. Conversations quieted. A few men by the freight crate stared a little too long. One muttered something crude under his breath. Rebecca ignored it and kept walking. She scanned the small crowd, looking for the man who was supposed to meet her. No one stepped forward. Then a deep, quiet voice behind her, "Rebecca Hollis." She turned. The man was tall, tanned from years in the sun, wearing a dusty coat and a wide-brimmed hat that shadowed his eyes. Weston Tate. He looked like he belonged to the land, solid, weathered, and not much for words. "I never sent for a bride," he said, voice low and rough. Rebecca didn't flinch. She reached into her pocket, pulled out the letter, and held it out calmly. "You can send me back," she said clearly. A few people nearby smirked or whispered. Then a small voice piped up. "Miss Rebecca." A little boy stepped out from behind a wagon. Barely 4 years old, blonde curls messy, boots too big for his feet. "Tommy." He walked straight up to her and stood in front of her like he was shielding her from the stairs. Weston looked from the boy to the letter, and everything clicked. The handwriting, the words, it had been Tommy who wrote it. Weston exhaled slowly. He glanced at the onlookers, then back at Rebecca. "My son already chose you," he said firmly. And just like that, in the eyes of the town, the matter was settled. Later that day, the gossip spread fast. Rebecca didn't ride out to the ranch with Weston, he hadn't offered, and she hadn't asked. Instead, he arranged the only available room in town, a small lodging above the general store. It wasn't fancy. The walls were thin, the bed narrow, but it was clean and private. He paid in advance and handed her the key without a word. Rebecca unpacked quietly, placed the letter on the table by the window, and sat watching the street below until late. Weston didn't head home either. He borrowed a horse, tied it nearby, and sat on a bench outside the store until the lamp in her window went out near dawn. The next morning, Rebecca noticed a chair had been pulled up beside the bench during the night. The seat was still faintly warm. A few days later, the town council held a meeting in the community hall to discuss the situation. The room was packed, people curious, skeptical, or just looking for something to talk about. The letter was read aloud, shaky, childish handwriting asking for someone who could make his pa smile again. Some people shifted uncomfortably. Others hid small smiles. One council member asked Weston directly if he accepted responsibility for the misunderstanding. Weston stood. "The letter went out under my name," he said. "That's enough. I'll take whatever comes with it." The decision: Weston would pay a fine and be barred from regional cattle sales for 6 months, a heavy blow for a rancher. He accepted it without protest. "She came here in good faith," he said simply. "That deserves respect." After the meeting, feeling the weight of having her future decided for her yet again, Rebecca decided to stand on her own. The next morning she walked to the mining camp on the edge of town. She found an old abandoned shed and started cleaning it out. "I used to teach back east," she told a woman tending a cook fire. "I can teach the kids here." There was no school, no supplies, no pay. But Rebecca swept the floor with a branch, gathered crates for seats, and used charcoal to write letters on scraps of board. At first the children just watched. Then they started coming inside. By the end of the week she had a proper little class. What she didn't know was that Weston had been watching from a distance. On the 7th day he sold his prized horse, Shadow, the best he'd ever raised, to a buyer from out of territory. The money went quietly into supplies, lumber for a proper roof, real benches, slates, chalk. When the materials arrived, the note simply said, "From someone who believes in what you're doing." Rebecca noticed the empty spot in the corral one afternoon on her walk home. That evening she went to the ranch. "You sold him," she said quietly. Weston didn't deny it. "You didn't save me," she told him. "You gave me space to stand up for myself." Then she turned and walked away. A few weeks later, a well-dressed man arrived from the east in a polished carriage. He carried papers claiming a prior engagement with Rebecca and demanded she return with him. The town gathered. The men spoke loudly about contracts and obligations. Rebecca stepped forward. "If I belonged to you," she said evenly, "you wouldn't have had to come all this way to fetch me." Weston appeared beside her, placed a steady hand on her shoulder, and said quietly, "She stays because she chooses to." The men looked around, saw he had no support, and left the next day. After that, things quieted, but Rebecca still lived in town. She kept teaching, kept walking the road alone. One afternoon Weston found her sorting books in the new school shed. "It's time," he said. "Time for what? You've done more than enough on your own. I won't let you keep living above the store. Come home." She started to protest. "You're not a burden," he said. "You're my choice." He walked out, leaving the door open. She followed. At the ranch, he carried her bag inside like it was the most natural thing. The house was clean, a small fire going, wildflowers on the table. Tommy ran up grinning. "Ma's home." Weston didn't correct him. He showed Rebecca the main bedroom. "You'll take this room," he said. "I'll sleep in the office for now. We'll figure the rest as we go." That night, for the first time in a long while, Rebecca didn't feel like a stranger. Later, the Eastern fiancé tried one last time, filing a formal complaint accusing Weston of keeping Rebecca against her will. A territorial official came to investigate. But the town had changed. Parents whose children were learning to read, neighbors who'd seen Rebecca's quiet strength, they all spoke up. The official saw the school, talked to the kids, reviewed the facts, and closed the case. Voluntary stay, valuable community member. A week later, after a summer storm knocked down part of a fence, Weston went out to fix it in the clearing weather. Rebecca followed with a lantern. He paused, looked at her, and said, "I never asked properly. But you're already my wife in every way that matters." She smiled softly. "Then let's say it out loud, for us." A week after that, beside the quiet creek on the ranch, with only Tommy as witness, they spoke simple promises to each other, words about choosing, staying, building a life together. No rings, no crowd. Just the three of them and the wide sky. A year later, the ranch felt fuller. Rebecca had started a proper garden, rows of vegetables climbing trellises she and Tommy built together. Chickens scratched in a new coop. The old parlor had become a schoolroom, children from nearby homesteads came every morning. One afternoon, Tommy looked up from stacking books and said, "We built this place, didn't we, Ma?" Rebecca smiled. "Yes, we did." Weston still wasn't a man of many words, but he moved through the days with steady care, fixing things before they broke, leaving fresh bread on the table, brushing Rebecca's hand as he passed. They never needed grand declarations. They just lived it. On the wall of the schoolroom hung a framed letter in crooked childish handwriting, "My pa is real sad. I think he needs someone who can smile big." A little girl asked what it meant. Rebecca answered gently, "It means someone believed a kind heart could fix something broken. And sometimes, the youngest ones are the wisest." That evening, the three of them sat on the porch watching the sun sink across the prairie. Tommy dozed between them. Weston reached over and took Rebecca's hand. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. The house behind them was warm, the land quiet, and the family they'd built, through letters, storms, and quiet courage, was whole. If this story warmed something quiet in your heart, if it reminded you that real love is often chosen, earned, and built with steady hands, then stay a while. There's more like it on the trail ahead. Like, comment, subscribe. We've got more stories of untamed hearts and second chances waiting just over the horizon. 2 years later, Dusfield Station, New Mexico Territory, spring 1894. The ranch had grown in quiet ways. A new room added onto the house for storage and lessons on rainy days. The garden stretched farther now, heavy with early greens and the promise of corn. The schoolroom saw more faces. Children riding in from distant homesteads, their parents grateful for a place where learning didn't cost more than a day's work. Rebecca stood at the kitchen window one morning, hand resting lightly on her apron, watching Tommy, now 7 and all long legs and serious eyes, help Weston mend a section of fence after a spring windstorm. She'd known for weeks, but hadn't found the words until that evening, when the three of them sat on the porch as the sun dipped low, painting the sky in soft oranges and pinks. Weston leaned back in his chair, hat tipped low, one boot crossed over the other. Tommy sprawled on the steps, whittling a stick into something that might one day be a horse. Rebecca took a slow breath. There's going to be 4 of us come winter. Weston stilled. His eyes lifted to hers, steady and searching. Tommy looked up sharply. 4. Rebecca nodded, a small smile tugging at her lips. A brother or sister for you? Tommy's face broke into a grin wide enough to light the dusk. He jumped up and threw his arms around her waist. I'm gonna be a big brother. Weston didn't move at first. Then he reached over, his rough hand covering hers where it rested on her middle. No grand words, just that touch, warm and sure. Later, when Tommy had run off to check on the new foal, Weston spoke quietly. You all right? Better than all right, she said. A little tired, a little nervous. But happy. He nodded, the corner of his mouth lifting just a bit. We'll make it work. But the joy came with worry. The penalties from years back still lingered, fewer sales, tighter margins. The herd was smaller than it should be, and feed costs rose with every dry spell. Weston worked longer hours, mending what broke, stretching every dollar. One afternoon, Rebecca found him in the barn, staring at the ledgers spread on a hay bale. His brow was creased deeper than usual. We'll need more for the little one, she said softly, coming to stand beside him. Doctor visits, supplies. I know. His voice was low, edged with frustration he rarely let show. I've been thinking about selling off the north parcel. It's good grazing, but we could manage without it. Rebecca shook her head. That's the best water access. We'd regret it come summer. He rubbed a hand over his jaw. Then I don't know. They sat in silence for a long moment, the weight of it settling between them like dust after a herd passes. That night, Tommy knocked on their bedroom door long after he should have been asleep. Can't sleep, he mumbled, clutching his whittled horse. Rebecca lifted the quilt. Come here, then. He crawled in between them, small but sturdy now. After a while, his voice came out of the dark. I heard you talking about money. About selling land. Weston sighed. Ears like a hawk, this one. I could help, Tommy said earnestly. I can herd better now. Or, maybe I could stop taking lessons sometimes, help more around the place. Rebecca's heart squeezed. She pulled him closer. Your learning matters, Tommy. That's not up for trade. Weston reached over, ruffling the boy's hair. Listen here. We're not selling anything yet. And you're not quitting school. Big brothers need to know their letters, to read stories to little ones, teach numbers. Tommy was quiet, thinking it over. Then, I could gather eggs every day. Sell in town like Mrs. Harlan does. Save it all for the baby. Rebecca felt Weston's gaze on her in the dim light. She could almost hear his small smile. That's a fine idea, Weston said. We'll start tomorrow. Over the next months, Tommy took to it with fierce determination. Up before dawn to check the nests, carefully cradling eggs in a basket, riding into town twice a week with Weston or one of the hands. He kept every coin in a tin under his bed, counting them out loud each night. The schoolchildren noticed too. One day, a girl from the mining camp brought a knitted blanket, her mother's work. Another family sent preserved fruit. Quiet offerings, no fanfare, just neighbors doing what they could. By fall, the tin held enough for a proper cradle and layette. Tommy presented it proudly one evening, eyes shining. For the baby, he said. From me. Rebecca knelt, hugging him tight. Weston stood behind, hand on the boy's shoulder. You did good, son, he said, voice rough. Real good. That winter, when the first snow dusted the hills and their daughter arrived, small, fierce, with a cry that filled the house, Tommy was the first to hold her after Rebecca. He looked down at the tiny bundle, then up at his parents. She's perfect, he whispered. We built this too, didn't we? Rebecca smiled through tired, happy tears. Weston nodded once, eyes soft in a way few ever saw. Yes, he said simply. We did. The ranch carried on, money still tight some seasons, work never done, but fuller now, stronger. A family not just chosen once, but chosen every day, in small acts and steady hands. If this next chapter stirred something warm in you, if it reminded you that family grows through hard times as much as good, held together by quiet courage and young hearts learning to carry their share, then stay with us. There's more trail ahead, more stories of love that doesn't shout, but stands firm. Like, share, subscribe. We've got untamed hearts waiting just over the next rise.